Welcome to the Bill and Kap Show. I am your host today, just Bill. No Cap today, but I am really excited to have on our guest today. We have Dion McNeeley. He is a self-identified lazy investor, the host of Dion Talk Financial Freedom on YouTube, who actually just retired last year. Dion, welcome to the show.
Howdy. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, absolutely, Dion. So tell the listeners, if they don't know you, a little bit more about who you are and where you came from.
Okay, so a little over 12 years ago, I found myself at the age of 40, recently divorced, single parent with 3 kids. I got laid off from a police department because in 2008 the recession happened, and after, when there's a recession, it's like there's no more crime, so we don't need cops anymore. And I started teaching people how to drive trucks, making $17 an hour, waiting for the recession to get over. Found out about $89,000 in bad debt in my name that I didn't know existed until the divorce. I had tried for 2 different pensions. The first was in the Marine Corps, but after Desert Storm, the Marine Corps downsized. And then law enforcement, after about 8 years, getting laid off in the recession, same thing. The idea for a pension got taken away. So I decided I needed to make my own pension. And I started investing in buy and hold real estate. It took about 8 years to reach financial independence, where work was optional. I got rid of all the bad debt. I started with a form of house hacking. I'm actually still house hacking. I live in one of the units of my fourplex. And now I have 16 rental units that kick off a little bit more than $17,000 a month in cash flow. And cash flow is what's left after all expenses and setting aside for future repairs, maintenance, and vacancy. And that let me retire last year at the age of 52 and do a whole lot of nothing since.
Wow. So that's pretty incredible. So tell us, what was that mindset shift for you, making $17 an hour, a lot of bad debt? What made you, purchase that first deal? Did you have someone in your life that invested in real estate? Did you Google, how to make money and find bigger pockets like I did? I know that was kind of a while before Bigger Pockets was really around. So tell us, what was that mindset shift for you to just say, hey, let me go buy a place and figure it out?
Well, I had a couple of examples of people who reached financial freedom through rentals. My brother has 10 paid off rentals. He used a strategy that I couldn't. He used a home equity line of credit. I didn't have any equity in my house. I was actually upside down because of the 2008 housing crash. Let me apologize to everybody. I actually caused it. I'm one of those people that had an adjustable rate mortgage, financed more than the house was worth. I was able to keep it. I didn't lose it. But those type of loans were exactly why the 2008 housing crash happened. We had over 50% adjustable rate loans in 2007, with people doing ninja loans where you had no income, no job, no assets. You just told the bank what you made and you could borrow however much you wanted to. And so it makes sense that it imploded. So I didn't have equity to do what he did. And he also has like craftsman skills. So he would buy a place that was falling apart, do all the sweat equity work himself, turn it into a really great rental, pay off his home equity line of credit, rinse and repeat it till he had 10. Well, I didn't have that option. I actually had a really bad debt to income ratio, low salary. A lender, luckily during a conversation, a lender mentioned, I pretty much am not going to qualify to buy any rentals like my brother did, because my debt to income ratio was bad and my salary was low. And casually the lender mentioned, unless we somehow had rental income on your tax returns, I don't see you becoming an investor. When I owned my house, I owed more than it was worth, so selling it wasn't an option. Getting any kind of equity out wasn't an option. Taking out a home equity line of credit, again, not an option. So I moved into an apartment. Like most people talk about, once you own a house, you never want to rent again. Well, it was the path for me. So I started renting an apartment. I rented out my house for 2 years. And the first year I made a lot of mistakes. I hadn't found Bigger Pockets yet. I hadn't read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I didn't start listening to podcasts or audiobooks or anything to educate myself. But after 2 years and learning how to save and control my expenses and deciding which type of bad debt I wanted to tackle, at the 2-year mark, I had rental income on my tax returns. I had a savings of about $28,000 in those 2 years, working a lot of overtime and a side hustle, a ridiculously nerdy side hustle. I actually played a game called World of Warcraft and sold things online so that I could be around the house with the kids and have that hobby make, $300 or $400 a month. And at the 2-year point, my goal was to buy a house. and repeat the cycle. I had a house, I rented it out. I figured I could buy another house, live there for a year or two, rent it out, buy another house. But all of my rentals are between Tacoma and Olympia in Washington State. And in this area, I have never in a decade seen a single family house that would cash flow. So I shifted to small multifamily. All of my units, I have the one single family house I purchased long before I was an investor. But everything I've purchased since then is I've never purchased another single family house. I now own 4 duplexes, a triplex, and a fourplex, totaling 16 units with the single family house. But that first purchase was a duplex. I moved into one side and rented out the other. I was paying about $1,500 a month for the apartment. And when I moved into the duplex, my cost of living dropped to about $300 a month, letting me save $1,200 a month. And when you're making $17 an hour, $1,200 a month is a huge amount. It was another 2 years before I bought another investment property. So in the first 4 years of investing, all I really did was 2 transactions. And I try to tell people, maybe warn people, those first 5 years are going to be the slowest. Nothing happens really fast. After you have 2 or 3 cash flowing rentals, this thing starts to happen that I call the income snowball. The house was rented out. I lost money the first year, but I started making money the second year. By that 4th year, it was making several $100s a month. The duplex, the second purchase, was another duplex that was making about $800 a month. My living expenses were still small. And then it starts to become a lot easier to save, and the timeline speeds up for that next one. The next duplex was about a year and a half later. And it just gets faster and faster after that.
Wow. So you're telling me that you didn't get to 16 units overnight in 2 years? You didn't even buy anything? I think that's an important thing for people to hear, because some people might look at these people with financial independence, financial freedom, whatever you want to call it, and they will kind of fall for these get rich quick schemes. And unfortunately, real estate isn't a get rich quick scheme. It's get rich for sure if you do it the right way over a long amount of time. Did you kind of realize that at the time? Did you was that a calculated thing you were doing, moving out of your house? Because I feel like it's, it took a lot of sacrifice for you to move out of a house that I'm assuming you're pretty comfortable in, to then say, you know what, I'm going to let some strangers live in my home while I go rent another place. Am I kind of on the right track of what your thought process was there?
The way the topic usually comes up is somebody says, I could never do that because I have a family. And I think that's kind of a backwards way of looking at it. I had to do it because I had a family. And my kids were motivation for me to reach financial freedom. And I hope nobody takes offense at this. My goal is not to create generational wealth. Now, my kids will inherit what I invest in, but I'm not investing in such a way to try to have as much wealth as I can to pass on to them, because I think inheriting a lot of wealth can actually kind of ruin some people's lives. The best thing I think we could do for our kids is to take care of our finances so that we don't become a financial burden when we're too old to work. And so my path was 10 years. I kind of figured a rental every 2 years or so would give me 5 rentals by the time 10 years passed. And with 5 rentals, I would have enough cash flow to maybe not be financially free, but I'd be at a point where work was optional. And when the income snowball kicked in, in those first 4 years, I went from 1 house to 7 units. I purchased, the next duplex got me to 7 units. So within 6 years, I was at 7 units. After that, adding a fourplex and a triplex and another duplex faster really sped up the process. And I hear a lot of people talk about, they want to get rich faster. How could we do this sooner? And to me, a 10-year timeline seems the safe way to go. I think the average person can reach financial freedom in 10 years or less, even if you're not starting from the best position. I saw a meme, so who knows if it's true, right? But Bill Gates asked Warren Buffett why everyone is not rich like Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett's response was, because nobody wants to get rich slow. And when it comes to investing in real estate, we do hear stories of people who have a large number of units. And to me, unit count almost doesn't matter. To where it matters is, I think 16 might be too many. Financial freedom can come with a lot less than 16 units. So I'm not sure I'm going to always have 16. I might buy 1 or 2 more properties just because the money's piling up. But at some point I might sell, pay off some debt, increase the cash flow. When you start to invest, there's really 2 paths that you can choose. Some people choose to recycle capital. So they do things like take out a home equity line of credit, do a cash out refinance, or use a second mortgage if they have good interest on their current debt, or maybe sell a property and 1031 into another one. That will grow your portfolio faster, but with thinner margins. You're going to profit less because you're creating debt on existing assets. That's the one option. The other option for me, the one I chose, is to recycle cash flow. Every time I added a rental or increased my income, I didn't change my living style. I still had 15 to 20-year-old cars. I still stayed in the duplex. I didn't go and buy a bigger house. I didn't start taking vacations. I didn't take my first vacation until 8 years of investing. And so those first years of maintaining life and avoiding life creep made the income snowball and let me acquire assets faster. So I have less units, but I'm cash flowing an average of over $1,000 per door, which to me is more effective than having more doors that only cash flow $200 or $300 or $400 per door.
Wow. And so I want to kind of transition into how you're able to cash flow so much per door. So when you buy these properties, I know that they're definitely not cash flowing that much day one. Tell us a little bit about that strategy that I think you're a little famous for at this point. When you buy a place, you're looking to turn it around. What's your strategy there?
So it's usually how I like to start an interview, because anybody making it this far in the interview is definitely vested. But if somebody at the beginning had heard this, they might have stayed longer. But I do have a strategy that gets my tenants to ask me to increase the rent, which makes it a lot easier to find rentals. All of my deals are from the MLS. No off market, no special sauce, all conventional loans. I've not done any seller financing, no flip, no burn, nothing fancy. I call myself the lazy investor because when I started investing, I was working full time, 40 to 60 hours a week, raising 3 kids, trying to take care of the debt. I didn't have time to create another job, so I invested to create income. And I still self-manage my 16 rental units, and it takes me about 2 hours a month if I average out the year. So to me, that's a lot more time freedom than working 40 to 60 hours. And one of the reasons, there's 2 reasons why I get the cash flow that I do. The first, a lot of people look at their rental properties or their primary house and they think, I have equity. I don't like that word. To me, the word equity means, and this is the full definition in a sentence of the word equity, I have the ability to put debt on an existing asset. That defines what equity is to me. So I've never done it. No HELOCs, no cash out, no sell to 1031. I want to put money in a property and then leave it there and let it grow. Because the missing element is time. It doesn't happen overnight. It does take about 10 years. Normally when I buy a rental property and I get them from the MLS, I would get around a 10% cash on cash return year 1. By year 3, it's usually over 20 or 30% cash on cash return because rents go up, mortgages basically stay the same. You get a small increase, but nothing like what happens with rents. I only use fixed rate debt, 30 or 40-year mortgages. I won't do anything with an adjustable rate, no balloon payments. Like I said, all conventional lending. But the strategy that gets my tenants to ask me to increase the rent started because I was buying properties on the MLS that the owners, I think, were tired of being owners. They were probably in their 70s. I never met most of them, but the properties had kind of been neglected. They weren't falling apart, but they didn't need a lot of work. The tenants hadn't had the rents raised in a while, so the rents were falling behind. And the owners could probably get a better return buying stocks or now putting money in a high interest savings account because they hadn't raised the rent. It was the biggest mistake most owners make. But if you just jack up the rent, your tenants leave. So I would buy the properties, and I wouldn't use this strategy right away because I didn't get to vet the tenants that were living there. My preference is to buy already occupied or rent-ready properties. So if there's already a tenant in place, their rent is below average, I didn't get to run their credit. I didn't get to check their work history. I don't know if they're a good or a bad tenant. And the chances are they might be bad tenants, and that might be one of the reasons why the previous owner sold. So I wait about 2 months before I use the strategy so that I can vet the tenants to make sure they do the 3 things that really matter to a landlord. The first, do they actually pay their rent and on time? Second, do I get noise complaints because I'm buying small multifamily and I want to know if they're going to be loud tenants? Third, do they call me with super trivial things? Like those are the 3 things that kind of matter to me since I self-manage my properties. And at the 2-month point, I would also do some things to impress the tenant and let them know I'm actually going to fix the place up. The first thing I do anytime I acquire a property is you have an inspection report, which is kind of like a to-do list to give to your handyman or your contractors of any major items. But I'll replace the door locks with coated keyless locks. They're about $100, so they cost more than a regular lock. But I don't have any keys for any of my properties. My tenants don't have any keys, and in over a decade, I've never had one tenant lock out. And because there are 2 exterior doors, you put in locks, the chances of the batteries dying within the same 6-month period is astronomically small. And then I replace the exterior motion, the lights with LED motion sensor lights. So it improves the security, lowers the cost to the tenants. And I actually ask the tenants, as the new owner, my first agent told me never ask this because the tenant might ask for something too big. But I always ask the tenants, if they owned the place, what would they fix? And every time so far, the tenants have said something like, I would like a screen door, or the ceiling fan is squeaky, so I replace the ceiling fan. So I spend $100 or $200 fixing something that isn't on the inspection report that mattered to the tenant. Now at the 2-month point, the tenants realize I'm going to take care of the place. I actually cared about their opinion. And then I have this strategy conversation with the tenant. I call it the binder. It can be done through text or email, and I've done that when I've used it with the Housing Authority for Section 8 tenants. But I like to do it in person, and if you invest at a distance, you're probably not going to do it in person, so you might want to do it through email. But I take a binder. The reason I call it the binder is it's physically a 3-ring binder, and I go to the tenant. The first page of the binder is a picture of the property from Redfin or Zillow. So this is information. The whole point of the first page is to show the tenant I'm using information they can find themselves to verify what I'm saying. The image from Redfin or Zillow is the property. It will have the purchase price because it's 2 months into owning the property, so the tenants would be able to look up how much I paid. And I can tell the tenants that the rent you're paying made sense to the previous owners. And it might be so low, that might be why they sold. But my taxes and insurance are going to be based on this new rent, what they call it, Zillow zestimate of what they think the value is. The tenants don't care what your expenses are. So that's not the point of that part of the conversation. If tenants cared what your costs were, a paid off property and a house with a mortgage would rent for totally different amounts, and they don't. The next page in the binder is a map from apartments.com or Zillow that says, here's the pinpoint locations of all the rentals in the area that have the same number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, pool, garage, whatever is the same. Make sure it's as similar as possible. And it shows what each one of those rentals rents for. What the map is on the map. After that, I print out 5 or 6 of those actual rentals so the tenant can see. And again, they can go to apartments.com, they can go to Zillow, they can go to Craigslist, they can find these rentals. I want to use current information to show them what the rents are. And so in most cases, and I'll give a kind of a loose example, I purchase a property where the area average rents are $1,500 or $1,600 for a 2-bedroom unit in a town that I buy the duplex. Rents are $800 or $900. If I went in as the owner and I said, hey, I'm raising your rent $100 a month, I'm a jerk. Tenants would get angry, probably leave, probably go to social media and call me a bad person. But if I go and I show them the binder and I say, if you move, right, the best thing for me is if you move out, because then I'll fix the place up and I'll get $1,500 or $1,600 a month. But I don't want to kick you out of your house. This is how much it's going to cost you if you move to a similar rental in the same area. You're going to be paying $1,500 or $1,600, and you have to move. I don't want to raise your rent to that point, and I don't want to kick you out of your house, but I can't leave it where it is because I'd be losing money. What do you think is fair? And that's the magic sentence, actually asking the sentence, what do you think is fair? I've had tenants almost across the board every time ask for the rent to go up $300 or $400, 3 or 4 times what a jerk would raise the rent. And the tenant is asking for it to go to $1,350, $1,400. So they're not going all the way to $1,500 or $1,600. They're not stupid. They know that you're not having to rehab the house, so why would the rent go that high? But they ask for it to go up significantly. And when I agree, they say, thank you. I don't have to do a rehab. I don't have to relocate the tenants. I now make my return that I need to on the property, so I don't have to use existing rents. I use 10 to 15% below area average when I'm estimating my rents to look at deals. And so far, I haven't had it ever happen where the tenant said, well, I'd like the rent to stay the same or go down. I have had times where a tenant asked for too small of an increase because I use the term, what do you think is fair? And they shared what they think would be fair for them. It's an ongoing conversation. I then say that does sound fair for you, but do you see how far you are off from the area average? It's a conversation that doesn't just settle on one number and that's it. And so far, tenants have then agreed to a larger number. I've had hundreds of people use this strategy and reach out to me and share their experience. I am making a video on my channel where two people are sharing that their tenants, and these are two people who don't know each other, their tenants asked for the rent to go up more than they were comfortable with. So in both cases, they said, that's great, that would be fair, but let's go about $100 or $150 less than what the tenant was suggesting. Imagine how happy those tenants are. Because that's the goal of my strategy, is there's going to be a rent increase. And my tenants are happy. In 12 years of investing now with 16 units, I've had a total of 4 tenant turnovers. Ever. 4 tenant turnovers. And part of that is because I keep my tenants happy. I had one tenant pass away, one tenant inherited a house, one tenant purchased a house, and then one moved out of the area. So I've never yet had a tenant move out of one of my rentals into another rental in the same area because I'm using this strategy and I actually take care of the properties.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. I've had good success myself with that strategy. I don't physically use a binder, but in general, what I do, and I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this, is I send them a text basically just asking, hey, are you looking to stay? Sometimes they're inherited tenants, sometimes they're not inherited. That they're tenants that I placed, but as I'm sure it has in your area, in the last 2-3 years, rents have shot up considerable amount, probably 20 to 30%. And I've been pretty successful thus far with tenants asking me for more of an increase than I was really expecting. So it's kind of saved me from having to do rehabs and placing new tenants and things like that. But I'm actually curious your thoughts. I just had my first tenant ever tell me, for some context, it was rented in the beginning of 2020, kind of right before prices started going up, for like $10.95, and then I think I was getting another $25 in pet rent. The cat died, and it went back down to $10.95. But now I could probably get rehabbed. I could probably get $1,500 for this unit. Now it is a little bit dated, and I think as is, I could probably get $1,400 for it. And I was looking to get her to $1,300, so still giving her a discount. And I finally had someone give me a number that I wasn't happy with, because everyone else has given me a number that I'm happy with. And she was like, well, the heating is pretty expensive on this unit, and I appreciate that the rent's been the same for 3 years, but I can't afford more than $125 rental increase. And what is your thought there? And I'm sure I'm not the first person to ask you this question on that method.
So a thing to take away from any kind of negotiation is the first person to speak loses. That's why we're asking, what do you think is fair? Get the tenant to talk first. So this is that scenario where they suggest something that's too small. One of the drawbacks to not using a physical binder is the tenant might go and look up the information themselves. Remember, we showed the first page to show that we're using transparency. So then they generally look at the 5 or 6 pages. So in an email, you make 5 or 6 PDF or screenshots of the properties in the area. That tenant might have gone on to Craigslist or apartments.com and looked up and found low-income housing rentals. So there might be rentals in your area. If the area average is $1,500, like you said, they probably found some that are $1,100, and they think that their $125 is more than you deserve or more than you should get. So with the binder, you can actually point out, and I do say this to some tenants, if you look in our area and you find some that are really low, those are low-income rentals. If you qualify, I suggest you go move into those to save the money. If you don't qualify, because if you make more than $15 an hour, you're probably not going to qualify for low-income housing. And that's area specific, so know what works in your area. That's what it is in mine. Then make sure they're comparing apples to apples. You don't want them comparing your rent to something they don't qualify for as far as low-income housing goes. And it's an ongoing conversation. And in some cases, the best thing for the owner is for the tenant to move out. Right, you might have a rehab of $2,000 to $5,000, but then you're going to get area average rents of at least $15,000 because you now have a new shiny unit in the area. But if you're like me, I don't want to displace somebody. I don't want to kick them out of their house. I don't want to lose money. Right, we're not running a charity. And if the person does qualify for low income housing, you want them to move out and get into it. but let me know what happens now, and maybe actually send back some of the comps that they didn't find. Look up the ones that are 1,500 in your area that are the same number of bedrooms and bathrooms. Send it to her in an email or in a screenshot from your text, if that's your best form of communication, and say, this is what the area averages are. Your number does sound good. I understand that that's fair to you, but I'm trying to be fair to both sides. What do you think is fair? And see what she says.
Yeah, to be fully transparent, I haven't even responded to her yet, and I know I should. But I think I have a pretty good comp because it's literally the unit next door. It's actually the unit that I first lived in. It was my first house hack deal. It's now renting. When I bought the place in January of 2020, the unit that I ended up moving into was renting for $800 at the time, and her unit was renting for $650. I had since rehabbed that unit, and now it's renting for $1,575, and she is the one next door currently at $1,095. So I have a comp. I can tell her, hey, listen, my unit next door is renting for $1,575. You're currently at $1,095. Me bringing you to $1,300 is giving you a break. And I know it would probably benefit me to have her move out, have me clean up her unit a little bit and rent it for significantly more. But there's obviously the time and the hassle factor that kind of comes into play as well.
So part of this is the mindset of the person you're talking to. So you always want to know who your audience is. And as an investor, you are thinking, my expenses are this much, a tenant is paying this much. The person, their response, if you use just that one comp and don't send them some other comps to look at, is probably going to be, well, of course they're paying $1,575. They make more money than I do. And an element of the equation that doesn't matter to the investor, right, is what can the asset perform as? So I think you need to actually educate. That's the point of the binder conversation, is you're educating the tenants. If you haven't been paying attention, prices have gone up, taxes have gone up, insurance has gone up, rents have gone up, and I don't want to raise your rent to the maximum because I know that would be mean, but the 125, it doesn't make it worth me renewing a lease.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. You're totally right. Sometimes it's you need somebody else to kind of give you the kick in the behind to do what you need to do. But that's a pretty good insight. So tell me a little bit more about you're at 16 units now. You seem to have this whole rental increase down. It's amazing that you've only had 4 move-outs, by the way. I think that's pretty unheard of for 12 years of investing. So where are you going from here? Are you focused on building the YouTube channel? Do you want to grow a massive portfolio of thousands of units and raise a bunch of money and take on a bunch of debt? Or are you happy with where you're at?
So my goal was financial freedom and to not become a burden to my kids when I'm too old to work, which is now, because I'm never going to work again in my life. Financial freedom happens when you pass your freedom number. And most people, if you ask the average person, not somebody who's listening to a podcast like this, but your average person. So if you're listening to this podcast, ask some people who aren't too interested in finances, who don't pay too much attention to it, how much money do you think you would need to retire? Most of them are going to give you a number. They're going to say $1 million, $5 million, $250,000, whatever they're going to say. It's a number. If you have the investor's mindset, it's not a number. Money, actual cash, loses value to inflation each year. And as you spend it, you're eventually going to run out. Financial freedom comes from cash flow, an amount of money coming in every month that you don't have to sell your life for 1 hour at a time, that is more than it costs you to live. And we have that data. It's not a mythical, I think I'm going to spend this much in retirement. Look at your last 6 months. You have the data now. Look at credit card receipts, bank statements, all the receipts you have. What you've been spending can tell you very closely what it's going to cost you to retire. Your expenses almost usually stay the same. You are going to pay more for healthcare because right now usually your employer's paying 80% of your premium, you're paying 20%, you're going to shift to paying 100% of that. So expect $1,000 to $3,000 a month for healthcare. It's just an expense. So you're going to have an asset cover that expense. Don't let healthcare be the thing that keeps you working when you don't have to. And then with food, transportation, housing, my freedom number is around $4,000 a month, right? It was probably less, but I'm still house hacking. And since I'm being paid to live where I am at, I estimated a bit higher at $4,000. If I had $4,000 coming in, work is optional. But that doesn't mean I got to $4,000 a month and retired. I use what I call the 4X rule. If I have cash flow coming in that is 4 times what it costs me to live, then I don't need to work. So since I passed 16,000, which would be my 4X rule, I retired last year. and will never work again. I don't want to grow the portfolio. I probably will, because there's about $500,000 because the cash flow just keeps piling up in the bank. Because even though I'm trying to, I'm taking cruises, taking month-long trips. I've been to Thailand with my brother for a month, Colombia for a month. We toured the U.S. in a pickup for a month and stayed at Airbnbs. This is the problem I'm trying to get to every one of your listeners. I want you to have more money coming in than you know what to do with. And for me, that's $17,000 a month. For you, it might be more. It might be less. It might be $5,000 or $10,000 a month. But my goal going forward, and I get this from a YouTuber named Joe Kuhn, Kuhn, who used the stock 4% rule and the bucket method to retire. So he's not in real estate like I am. It's a very different strategy for investing, but he's brilliant. And he has a phrase I like, and it is, retire to something, not from something. Right? If you hate your job, if you just can't stand going to work, quit and go get a different one. Life's too short to do that. I loved my job. I started teaching truck driving at the school. I found out I'm fairly decent at teaching. I love to work with people when they're learning something. I got demoted all the way down to president of the company, grew it from 1 location to 5, grew it from 6 staff to 60. I got to set my schedule. I was making a ton of money. I loved the work, but time freedom won out. So I retired to have all of my time back. So what I retired to is time freedom so I can travel. But the one thing that I do that I enjoy, and this makes me, I think, to me, it makes me sound very selfish. I reached financial freedom starting from a really bad position, right? $89,000 in debt I didn't know existed, single parent making very little money. Imagine the emotional roller coaster of going to now to where my profit in 2022 was $203,000 after all expenses, tax-free, because of the beautiful way investing in real estate works, is after taxes, without having to work for it. Doing 2 hours a month, mostly to make sure rent was paid and send some messages to handymen to make sure things get done. But I'm not going to the properties. I'm not going to deal with plumbing issues. The tenants pay for all of those issues out of the rent. So it's not like an extra charge. The rent covers that. I can only experience that once. Going from a position where I wasn't making a lot of money, I was probably going to work until I died, I was going to become a burden to my kids, they weren't going to inherit anything, to where now I have a net worth in the multiple millions. Kids are going to inherit millions, hopefully 20 or 30 years from now, but and it'll even be more then. I won't become a burden to them. So I want to experience that again. But I'm not stupid. I'm not going to give away all my rentals and try to do it again just so I can experience it. What I want to do is I have my YouTube channel, Dion Talk Financial Freedom, where I share strategies, whether it's investing in stocks, crypto, growing a business, using real estate, which is what I focus on the most. But it's reaching financial freedom through whichever path works for you. And every time I'm working with somebody and they tell me, I just closed on my first duplex house hack, I get to have a little bit of that experience again. And I watch them get closer to their financial freedom. And so that's what I'm retiring to, is how do I help people do the same thing?
Wow, that's pretty incredible. So you're retired now. You're helping other people do the same thing. I first came across you in the real estate rookie group for Bigger Pockets, and I just remember seeing this guy Dion always pop up in the comments, helping people out with these really thoughtful long comments, and I was like, wow, this guy kind of gets it. He's going places. And the next thing you know, you're on the podcast, and you're on the real the OG podcast, they call it. And I always thought your takes on things were pretty spot on. There is a kind of a take that I feel like I've heard you make before, and I wanted to ask you about too. Retirement accounts. You're retired now. It's all off cash flow, and I think that's a little bit of a controversial opinion that I'd like to kind of have you elaborate on a little bit as you go down the kind of the path of helping others retire.
Sure. There's a couple things I have what I would call a contrarian view on, right? And because the mainstream wants you to have retirement accounts, and if you don't invest, if you don't grow a business, if you don't buy cash flowing rentals, if you don't create money that doesn't take you working, absolutely have a retirement account. It's better than nothing. But there's three people who benefit from retirement accounts. The first is the government. They're hoping people are stupid and that you think taxes are going to be less in the future and that you're going to retire broke. So they're going to make more money on taxes in the future. The second is your employer. Your employer benefits because I ran a company, and our retirement account is called a retention program. How do we keep people working for us longer? We lower wages to call it a match on a retirement account. Your compensation is probably the same. If you picked between a company that has a retirement account and doesn't, the one that doesn't usually pays more because they're not compensating you with a match for your retirement account. So it's not like you're making more money or getting free money. So if you work at a company that has a match, I continued to contribute for the match until I retired. So I agree with that. If I had a choice between picking a company that had a 401k match or not, I would pick the one that didn't and paid more. But since I worked at one that had a program, because we wanted to retain employees, that was the purpose of it, I got the match myself. The third person who really benefits from retirement accounts is the people managing them, because they make money whether you do or not. And so they're really benefiting from it. They have marketing campaigns to talk about how great retirement accounts are. They have lobbyists talking about how great retirement accounts are. And I messed up when I first started investing or started to make enough money. I was maxing out retirement accounts, trying to save money on taxes, hoping to retire broke, hoping taxes would be less in the future. And once I started to invest and realized I can get a return out of a rental that was 3 or 4 times the return on a retirement account with better tax benefits, I stopped maxing out those accounts and I just did for the match, which irritated me. I actually still have I emptied it out in 2020 because we got really lucky because of the pandemic. You could take money out of a retirement account without paying the 10% penalty, so I took it out, bought a triplex. So now it's making me thousands, literally thousands of dollars a month, almost a decade before I'd be able to touch it if it was in a retirement account. Self-directing retirement accounts to buy rentals is the dumbest thing you can do because it takes away all of the benefits of owning rentals. Can't self-manage, can't depreciate, the funds, there's all these negative things that happen with it. So when somebody suggests that's the solution, it's not the solution. If you are not investing in a way that produces money, I absolutely understand retirement accounts, and I wish people had them. When we have those statistics of 67% of the country doesn't have $1,000, there's all kinds of reasons why people should be saving in a way like a retirement account where it works because you pay yourself first. It comes out of your money before you see it. But if you have a system set up where your money is invested in something like a rental that's going to actually produce cash flow, and let me do as quick a comparison as I can on a retirement account. Over a long enough period of time, the stock market returns 10% on average. Yes, we have years like the last 2 where you can lose 20 to 40%. My retirement account is down 24% year on year from last year. You can lose money, but average, I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt. 10% increase every year. If I buy a rental that has a 10% cash flow, right, 10% cash on cash return, that's a great deal. And right now, with interest rates being high and prices being high, it's really hard to find that 10% cash flowing deal. I totally understand. So I'm going to cut it in half. Let's say I only get 5% return on my 5% cash on cash return with a rental. It seems like the 10% in the retirement account return would be better. And I'll even double it. We'll say you're getting a 10% return on the retirement account and 100, and we're going to double it to 20% because the employer matches it, right? But I'm only get 5% in a rental. The retirement account comes when you're 59 and a half, so it'll be larger then. The 5% comes now every year that you get to either spend, save, or invest. But when I buy a rental, I'm using leverage. I'm not using leverage with my retirement account. I'm putting $100,000 into a rental to buy a $400,000 duplex. So real estate appreciates on average, and I'm going to take out the 20 to 30% appreciation we've had for the last 2 years. And I'm going to say on average over a long enough time, it's only 5% a year, right? We've had some great years, but let's just say it's only 5%. That $400,000 going up 5% is $20,000, right? So it's not a 5% return on that growth for my $100,000. It's a 20% return plus the 5% cash flow, plus it's tax-free. So the retirement account, if I gave you a 10% return every year and doubled it for the employer match, versus what we can put into real estate, it's a 25% return every single year that you have control of now. And it is significantly more than that because of the tax benefits. The tax benefits in real estate are way better than any retirement account. I get to carry forward losses. I made $203,000 in profit last year, and I'm carrying forward a loss to next year in case in 2023 I also have a profit. That doesn't happen in retirement accounts. So I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying they're not the path for somebody who wants to retire early.
Got it. I think that you said it better than I could. Now, I'm not expecting you to give a full CPA explanation because neither one of us are CPAs as far as I know. But can you briefly explain kind of those tax benefits for someone that is thinking about getting started in real estate? They hear about tax benefits. They might make a high W-2 income and they're like, okay, like they say tax benefits, but how does that actually work?
So the sarcastic answer, first, the short sarcastic answer is it's almost like Congress is full of people who own properties who keep making laws that benefit people who own properties. That's the sarcastic answer. The real answer is this country does not need employees. We're at the lowest unemployment rate since before I was born. We're at the lowest unemployment rate. The last time it was this low was May 1969. That's before I was born. So we don't need more employees. The company needs innovation, growth, housing, businesses. So there's business incentives where the worst form of tax is your job. A W-2 job is taxed the most. The only person who pays more is somebody who's self-employed, that runs their own business, and because they pay the employee tax for themselves and the employer's side of the tax for themselves. But a business pays capital gains. Corporate tax is less than earned income tax. Investors pay even less than that. So I recommend the book by Robert Kiyosaki called Cash Flow Quadrant. Really breaks down the benefits of investing because the government doesn't have a tax penalty system. We're not trying to tax people and punish them for making money. We're trying to incentivize people to do what the government needs. And what we need is more housing. So we have tax benefits. And you get to, the person with a job earns $100,000. The government takes the taxes out. The person gets what's left. If you earn $100,000 with a rental, you get the $100,000. You get to spend all of the money you want on repairs and maintenance, and then you get to depreciate your buildings. So even though appreciation happens and your properties become worth more money, they've gained value, you get to tell the government, my buildings are a year older, so they've lost some value. And you get to depreciate, and it's over a math equation of 27.5 years. So however, with the value of the buildings divided over 27.5 years, you get to take that off of any income you have from the property. Still, over a decade, with hundreds of thousands of profit every year, I've never paid a penny in rental income tax. Now, my tenants pay a lot of property taxes, but I don't pay income on rental. I don't pay taxes on rental income yet. I will someday, and it's going to suck. I'm going to make $500,000 some year without any depreciation left, and I'm going to have to give some money to the government. It's going to be a terrible year to be that wealthy that you have to pay taxes with real estate. That I'm looking forward to that. The benefits to real estate is not just depreciation. The problem is if you have a high income W-2, you don't get to invest in rentals and have the losses from rentals offset your W-2 income, right? They're not trying to incentivize high income earners to keep making a lot of money. That you get to use it against your rental income. There is a way, if you're a real estate professional, you work more than 751 hours in real estate, you work more in real estate than you do at your W-2 job, it can offset your W-2 income, but every CPA I've ever talked to, if you have a W-2 and you're audited, you will not pass the threshold of what it takes to be a real estate professional if you have an actual W-2 job. So it's not worth it for me to even risk that. You can do a creative strategy like my friend Matt, the lumberjack landlord, did, where his spouse is the real estate professional and he has an high-income W-2 job. Since she qualifies, then they were able to use it against his income. So they're always talk to your CPA to find out if there is an option to where it will work for you. I paid a lot of taxes in my last couple of years being president of the truck driving school on my W-2 income, but I've still never paid any on my rental income. Legally, because the government is trying to incentivize people, because buying a rental, so many people want to post the memes of how horrible landlords are and that they don't provide anything. But purchasing a property, purchasing builds, contractors doing the builds to create the homes is not going to happen without people buying real estate. Once you buy something that's falling apart and you do a burr and you do the rehab and you fix it up, you're actually creating housing, which is what the tax incentives are there for, to incentivize people to do those kind of things. we need more people to create more housing. A lot of the time we see people try to restrict the demand. You want to raise interest rates so less people want to buy a house, hoping that will bring the price down, instead of easing up on restrictions so that building can happen faster with less permit issues, and to create more housing, which would stabilize the market. There's a lot of problems that come up with the best intentions, kind of like rent control. Rent control is going to make me extremely rich, and it's going to harm all of my tenants if it happens here in Washington State. And most tenants want it to go into place because they think it's going to help them.
Explain that.
So I have tenants where I use the binder strategy when I purchase the property, and then I never touch the rent again 3 or 4 years. And some tenants I would do a 5% increase every other year. But I have a tenant in 3 or 4 years, their rent's the same. Because in 2021, when we have a black swan event, we have a pandemic or a global event where rents go up a lot because costs go up a lot. My insurance doubled, my taxes went up about 30%. Like, my expenses went up, and I was able to adjust rents in 2021 for all of my tenants. But several of them, for several years, didn't have a rent increase. If rent control goes into effect, and I can't adjust rents if we ever have another black swan event, I am then forced as an owner to do the maximum allowable rent increase every single year, so that I don't fall behind in case there's ever another time when costs increase greatly. So my tenants, instead of having 3 or 4 years with no rent increase, or let's go with the average of 5% every other year, they're now going to get, Washington wants to institute a 7% rent increase cap. I would go to 7% every year instead of 5% every other year. So let's say 5% every other year would be $100 if I had a $2,000 rent, which would be $50 a year. So I could raise the rents $50 a year. That would equate to what I was doing. But since I can't make a big adjustment if I ever need to, I'm forced to do the 7% every year, which would be $140 per year rent increase. It will triple my income. More than that, because this is adding to the gross value, which is really going to affect the bottom line. Because of rent control, I'll be forced to raise the rent significantly more often, because I can't do a big adjustment if I ever need to in the future. So that's how it's going to impact my tenants. Their rent is going to go up. How it's going to impact most tenants, because not everyone is ethically trying to keep their rents below average like I am. There are landlords who are trying to get the most rent they can. So there are legal ways. Tenants think there are legal ways to move tenants. Tenants think rent control will protect them, so their rent can only go up so much every year. So they'll never move. Well, the problem is tenants don't move. They get moved. The owner will say, you have 90 days to get out, I'm selling. You have 60 days to get out, I'm doing a rehab. You have 90 days to get out, I'm going to move in and owner occupy. To get the tenant out, they do a rehab. They go above area average because they have a new unit in a rent-controlled area, and they will make probably 30, 50% rent increase because they got rid of the tenant. And now that tenant has nowhere to go because all of the rents have increased because there's rent control in place. If rent control worked, rents would be affordable in Southern California and in New York or in Portland. And since rent control is in those places, rents are affordable here in Washington. As soon as rent control goes in, it will not be affordable to rent here. Seattle instituted something like rent control about a year ago. They you have to notify the tenants within 6 months of doing a rent increase over 10%, and if the tenant doesn't like it, you have to pay them 2 or 3 months worth of rent to help them move. Seattle lost 3,000 rental units, and it doesn't mean that the owners sold. They became short-term rentals. So less rentals on the market means less supply in a high-demand area, so rents would go up. And now those are short-term rentals. And then there are some people that want to combat that and say you can't do short rentals in an area. So then they become midterm rentals, traveling nurses, corporate, insurance. You'll have less rentals available at higher rents, and rents will go up more and more consistently. But tenants fight for rent control.
Wow. I explained that beautifully. I agree with you, and it's an unfortunate thing that I think a lot of people they have these certain expectations for whether it's policy, whether it's certain things like that, and they think that 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 it's going to benefit them in the long run, and in the short term it might, okay, my lease, but the unintended consequences is something that I think not a lot of people really think about, and you being someone that can explain things pretty well, I think is pretty valuable. But it makes a lot of sense. The last kind of more controversial thing that I've seen you bring up is the fact that you use multiple real estate agents. Tell me a little bit about your strategy there.
The key is transparency. Make sure
Yeah.
that the agents know what you're doing. Never hide anything, and let them decide if it works for them or not. If somebody is a home buyer and you're going to work with a realtor and you're going to have them take you to 10 or 15 houses and you're going to use up hours and hours of their time, I absolutely agree with the agent that the person should sign an exclusivity agreement. That agent should get the commission if that person buys a house. I'm an investor. I have never had an agent meet me or take me and tour me a property with me, not once ever. I want an agent to set up an auto search. Searching on the MLS is nuanced. It's in over a decade of searching on the MLS with at least 3 agents at all times, at least 3 having auto searches set up. One time in 10 years have those agents ever sent me the same deal within 24 hours. For the last few years, speed was really important. We needed to get an offer in with a letter of pre-qualification within hours of a property hitting the MLS before the seller realized they were going to get inundated with offers that were over asking, waiving contingencies, or maybe offering to name their kid after the seller if they would get the deal. You wanted to get your offer in fast. So seeing the listing as soon as possible was important. And I tell my agents, I say, look, I'm working with several agents. All you have to do is set up an auto search. You're never going to hear from me again until you send me a property that I want to make an offer on, and then I'll have you make an offer. That's when you'll hear from me again. I have seen people in social media land, agents say I would never do that. But I have never once in person in real life met an agent who wasn't okay with taking 15 or 20 minutes to set up an auto search on the off chance that they're going to make $15,000 from me on the next commission when I buy my next small multifamily house. I would never work with an agent and not tell them I have multiple agents. And I've had a few say, well, we would need to sign an exclusivity agreement. And I just say, fine, I'm not going to work with you. And then that goes away. But that way you have, because like I said, searching on the MLS is nuanced, meaning I have a copy and paste the exact same email that I send to the agents. This is the footprint I want to search in. This is the type of properties. In the beginning, I had a price that fit, taken that away. And then I have my I don't want. I don't want HOAs. I don't want short sales. I don't want foreclosures. Those are the 3 things I don't want. These are the things I want. Exactly, copy and paste, send. And they send me different deals. Now, if a property sits on the MLS for 2 or 3 weeks, eventually their search finds it. But within the first week, it's very rare to ever see the same property come from 2 different agents. So that's why I suggest working with multiple agents. Be transparent and don't take a lot of their time. And then the biggest advice I can give to anybody working with a realtor is never, ever negotiate down an agent's fee. That is death to an investor. If an agent is working with 20 people and you're the one who said, can I pay you less? You're never going to get the best leads. You're never going to get the best deals sent to you. They're going to get a phone call one time, because I've got agents that actually have their auto searches set up, but every now and then send me a text saying, did you see this specific one? This hits your criteria and it has exactly what you're looking for. They know what I'm looking for and want to be on my radar in case they know that I'm seeing a lot of properties. That will never happen if you try to negotiate down their fee. My goal is to make my agent as much money as possible so that they're motivated to bring me deals in the future.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's kind of difficult for some people to wrap their head around, especially, if they haven't had their first commission check before, or, if they haven't started to make money in real estate. I think it takes some time for people to realize that there needs to be like mutual benefit between everyone working together. Like real estate, it is truly a team sport. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, when you have multiple agents sending you properties, are you going to see the property with that agent before putting in an offer? Or are you saying, hey, this works, I'll add an inspection contingency, just lock it up, and then we'll figure it out later?
That's a great question, and it lets me know that you've thought through the process. A new investor thinks that you need to go see the properties. And if you don't know your market, maybe you do. But I invest in 2 counties where I've lived for decades. I know the streets I would avoid. I know enough to know I know the area average rents for the different locations. So I start with math. The first is I want to get that 10% or better cash on cash return. That's because I can find an average of 7 to 8%, so I'm trying to beat it with a 10. Right now with higher rates and high prices, I might be adjusting that to where I'm looking for an 8 because I can find 5 or 6%. And you know, so I'm trying to beat the area average. So that's just math. The next thing is the property type. I want to make sure it has good parking. It's not on a noisy street. I don't want under small multifamily because I don't want noise complaints or tenants living above or below another. So I have specific property criteria that I'm looking for that I can usually tell from a Google search, street maps view, or anything that I can do online. But I see a property I like where the math works in an area that I like, and I look for some red flags. I might reach out to the agent and say, can you confirm there's washer dryer hookups in each unit? Can you confirm there's no HOA? Can you confirm anything else that's specific to that property? So they might send 1 or 2 emails. If I have back that there's no HOA, there's the other things that I'm looking for, then I'll just say, okay, make the offer. And I've never made an offer without an inspection contingency. I have waived appraisal contingencies when I'm making an all cash offer because I know the value of the property in the area. I still have the inspection to where I can back out if I find more work than I need to do. And if I think the price is right for my numbers, but I think it's going to appraise low, I will put in a $5,000 or $10,000 appraisal gap to where if it appraises low, then to get my offer accepted, I will make that offer as well. But I've never gone to see a property before making an offer. I've done a quick little bit of, because I'm looking at 100 deals a week easily. Imagine if I took just 5 minutes to go look at each one I liked. I'd be creating another job. I make the offers, and my math is I make about 20 offers. I look at 100 deals to make 20 offers to get 1 accepted. That's kind of been my math. And then the one that's accepted, so far now I've backed out of 2 deals ever that I've had an offer accepted on. One appraised $50,000 too low and needed $50,000 in work that you couldn't tell until you got inside because all the joists were rotted from a leak that was persistent. And the other one was going to be my first BRRRR project. I haven't done any yet. I was going to do my first one. And it was the scope of the work and the problem with the property was a lot more than what I was willing to deal with. So those are the 2 times I've ever backed out after making an offer. So I don't have agents that are upset that they've ever done work to get their commission and I've wasted their time because they know that if I'm going to make an offer, I've already done the footwork to know, the majority of the time I'm going to follow through.
Makes sense. And you're buying all these properties in an LLC, right?
So obviously you've seen me on social media. There are times having an LLC makes sense. If you have partners, a limited liability company, the purpose of an LLC is to limit your liability from someone else's mistakes. It does not in any way, absolutely whatsoever, protect you from your mistakes. In the 2 counties that I invest, they don't pierce the veil. You're going to hear people say, well, they pierce the veil. They pierce it more often. If you Google piercing the veil, it means something was wrong with the way you structured it, and they can prove that the asset is yours. In the 2 counties that I invest in, so more counties are doing this, they're using the IRS 1996 precedents that all single-member LLCs don't exist. They call them disregarded entities. When you are sued, all of your LLCs are just your assets, so it's not a form of asset protection. There are no tax benefits. Like I said, it's the 1996 decision from the IRS. It's called single-member LLCs, disregarded entities. There are no tax benefits from having an LLC. So there is a long list of reasons why none of my properties are in an LLC or ever will be. They might eventually be in a trust to make it easier to transition to my kids owning them, but that's an after me being dead problem that I don't really care about. But the purpose of the LLC, if you need to use hard money or a lender's going to require it for the loan structure that you're going for, sure, there's a reason to have an LLC. But my concern, my concern is never somebody that has 5 or 10 or 20 properties and wants to have LLCs because they'll sleep better at night. Sure, waste your money, a couple $1,000s a year on having LLCs. I don't have a problem with that at all. It's the brand new investor that doesn't own a property yet or only has one and thinks they need to have an LLC. So now you can't house that because you can't own or occupy an LLC loan. They think I'll just get it in my name and I'll transfer it. I'll commit fraud and just transfer it into the LLC and hope that the lender doesn't trigger the due on sale clause, that is what it is. The lender made the loan based on the agreement that you are going to own or occupy or have it in your name, having less likelihood of you letting that loan go. So you put in an LLC, which changes the risk structure for the lender and is fraud. So I don't suggest doing that either. Yes, some lenders won't care, and some people have done it without issue. But once it's in the LLC, your insurance costs are going to go up. You can't represent yourself in court for even simple, trivial things, like just filing something, a portion of an eviction if you ever went through it. Lending is more expensive. Refinancing, I have friends who have put it in an LLC to protect it, which it didn't. Went to refinance, had to put it back in their name. So the transfer into the LLC had an expense, transfer back into their name had an expense, and they learned their lesson. And so it's the new investor that doesn't know, how do you name an LLC? How do you pay yourself from an LLC? How do you make sure you don't commingle finances? All the things it takes to put the LLC in place becomes a barrier to investing. Because here's what my business structure looks like, with hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit, being able to retire, 16 rental units that I self-manage. Here's the business structure. 1 checking account, 1 saving account, 1 credit card, 1 Excel spreadsheet with a tab for income and a tab for expenses that's set up the way my CPA asked to get all the information that they need to file the taxes. That's it. And in some areas you are required to keep deposits in a separate interest-bearing account. So make sure you're following your local laws. But that's my entire business. This can be as simple or as complex as you want. So you knew to ask about the LLC thing, because every time it comes up, I have a copy and paste answer for people saying, here's the reasons you should have an LLC. It's none of the reasons most people think it should be. And my concern is the new investor getting stopped in their tracks by thinking they need to do something that's not going to benefit them at all.
Makes a lot of sense, and I agree with you. I all my deals currently are my personal name too, but don't sue me. All right, so as we transition to kind of the end of our show, we have a couple of questions that we ask most guests. You give out a lot of advice on Facebook pages, on your YouTube channel, podcast interviews. If there was like one thing that you could tell a newer investor that kind of wants to follow the same path that you followed, what would that piece of advice be?
It's hard to narrow it down to one thing. But the first 3 steps to getting started in investing are the same for all of us, no matter our starting position or what our ultimate end goals are. Whether you want to have a huge portfolio where you do things like recycle capital with HELOCs, refinances, and sales, or you want to recycle cash flow. The first step is to learn how to save. And it doesn't mean spending less. The most important thing when it comes to saving is increasing your income. That can be a side hustle. It could be starting and growing a business. It can be working overtime. It can be learning a new skill to become more important to your company to try to get a promotion. It could be changing companies. There's actually studies that have happened that show people who change companies every 2 to 3 years end up making more money than somebody who stayed at a company for 10 to 20 years. Increasing your income without increasing your expenses will have a bigger impact on your saving than trying to save money on things. Once you learn how to save, and for me, a portion of that would include house hacking, reduce or eliminate that largest expense. The next thing is work on your credit score. Even if you're going to use DSCR or asset-based lending, they look at your credit score. The goal should be to get to a 740 or higher, because that gets you the best lending options. And understand that the FICO score and the thing you see on Credit Karma is very different. To get a FICO score of 740 or higher, your credit score on Credit Karma needs to be around 780. The lenders are going to see up to 30 to 40 points less than what you do. So you should be constantly trying to get your credit score increased. The third thing is talk to a lender to find out what your options are often, based on your work history, your salary, your rental income, your credit score, all of the things that they're going to look at. What are your options? That might be conventional lending. It might be DSCR. It might be asset-based. It might be seller financing if you can't qualify for anything else. That's sometimes the better option anyway. Those 3 steps, whether you have 20 rentals, you don't have one yet, you're starting, you invest in stocks, it doesn't matter who you are, those are the 3 options everybody should be working on before their first rental or before their next rental. Because if you get those things in order, it's going to make sense to take the next step.
Agreed. So how has your investing strategy changed over the years? Did you always know you were going to keep it very simple, straightforward, very repeatable? Or did you go from one thing to the other? Did you have shiny object syndrome at one point?
If you chase 5 rabbits, you'll starve is something I really believe in. And I focused on small multifamily. I've only house hacked twice, so you don't have to keep moving over and over and over. The rest were investment purchases. I invest in what I know. Warren Buffett talks about diversification. Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful will say, no more than 20% in one asset class, no more than 5% in any one asset. And I agree more with Charlie Munger. So Warren Buffett's partner says, don't diversify to become wealthy. Focus on one thing until you master it so that you can become wealthy. And then once you're wealthy, diversify to protect it. So my investing strategy to get going, I focused on house hacking, or only done that twice. Small multifamily rentals. I don't own any stocks. I wouldn't if somebody gave them to me. I would sell them and buy real estate. No retirement accounts anymore. I've got the one I've got to empty. So I'm not contributing to that anymore. My goal is to buy rentals that I understand. At some point, as the net worth hits 5 or 10 million, I might buy, 5% of the portfolio in stocks or precious metals or crypto or whatever at the time is more of money I'm okay with losing to diversify. I diversified in my asset class in two very specific ways to protect myself since I'm not diversified in other assets. The first is my small multifamily, my duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. My goal is that they're at least 10 miles apart, close to several economic drivers. So I have got next to a base, a port, a college, a hospital, Boeing or Amazon or a large population. So multiple sources of tenants and at least 10 miles apart, so I'm not taking tenants from the same thing. So the base can close down. I still have my port tenants. I still have my hospital tenants. I still have my police officers. And then, so that's the first way. The second way is I diversify my tenant base. I try to keep about 1/3 military, 1/3 Section 8, and 1/3 working or retired. So if something happens like a pandemic, stock market crash, prolonged government shutdown, only 1/3 of my portfolio is going to be impacted. So I'm diversified in two different ways. I keep good reserves. When I was growing, here's been the big shift. When I was growing my portfolio, my goal was to be around 70% loan to value. So if I had $1 million in real estate, I would want $700,000 in debt and $300,000 in equity. That was a safe position to where I can handle dips in the market. My rents would cover mortgages even if rents went down. And here's a great bit of trivia. Since we've started tracking the rents in 1940, there has never been one point in history that rents have ever gone down in a 5-year period. Not once. But I plan on rents going down up to 50% so that I can sleep at night. Rents have gone down in specific markets. If the car manufacturers move out of Detroit or .com crash hits Silicon Valley, yes, your rents can go down. But that's one of the reasons why I diversified next to several economic drivers and with different tenant types to protect myself from that. And of course, my brain shuts off right when I had a good thought. So I've diversified my portfolio. When I was growing it, I had the goal to have a 70% loan to value. While I was growing because I wanted the most appreciation. The benefit to real estate is getting appreciation on multiples of what you invest. When I retired last year, my goal was to stay at or below 50% loan to value. So right now I have $1.8 million in debt and the real estate values are it's just under $6 million. So if I sold everything, the cost of selling, the cost of taxes, net worth's around $3 million now. Maybe a little less than that. I don't plan on leveraging more than 50% now that I don't have the security of a W-2 job. And while I was growing, the size of my reserves would scale with the size of my portfolio. When I had 7 units or less, I figured $10,000 was a nice safe number. I can handle a roof replacement, water heater breaking, or a couple of months without rent. And then once I got over 7 units, I thought more things can happen at the same time. So I increased it to $30,000. And then when I retired, I've increased my reserves to $50,000. That's like an emergency account that I don't touch. But all of the while investing, that $10,000, $30,000, or $50,000, anything above that needed to be put to work to make me more money. That wasn't money for me to buy an RV or a boat or take a vacation or anything. The money above that in that account was to be invested. And now that I'm financially free, I'm actually struggling with learning how to spend money. So if anybody has any advice on that, let me know.
What's the worst advice you've ever received?
Be yourself. I was born poor, right? We used to move into houses, fix the doors and windows, and live there until the owner showed up and said, "Who are you?" And then we'd move to the next place. I started working in onion fields when I was 8 next to my mom. And I would get 50 cents per bag that I could fill. And on my best day, I think I made $16 that my mom would get. My reward for working was I would get to go to the Roach Coach and get a candy bar at the end of the day. That was mine, and I didn't have to share it. It's my only thing I didn't have to share with, 13 siblings? So I was significantly poor as a kid, and everybody would say, "Oh, just be yourself." Myself was poor. I don't want to be poor. And here's a short for you. The difference between poor people, middle class, and wealthy people isn't how much money they have or how much money they make. It's what they think the purpose of money is. Poor people think the purpose of money is to buy things. So if you want things, you work for money to buy the things. The middle class think the purpose of money is leverage. You want a nice house, you want a big car, so you get a good credit score, so you can get a bunch of debt and look wealthy. Wealthy people understand the purpose of money is to make more money. I stopped being myself when I was 40, and I quit trying to get a pension working for someone else, and I started buying cash flowing assets that would produce income without me having to work. I took on the wealthy mindset, and I thought every penny that I make, if I put it to work, eventually that money is going to make so much money, I don't have to work ever again in my life.
Wow. So, kind of last thing I want to go over is if somebody wanted to work with you, if somebody wanted to bring you a deal, bring you an agent, bring you a handyman, anything that you're looking for, how can our audience support you? You know, what are you looking for right now? And just tell us about that.
So the best way to find me is on YouTube, Dion Talk Financial Freedom. And my channel is small enough, I still answer every single question that comes in. On Tuesday afternoons at 4 p.m. Pacific, I do a live stream that lasts as long as the questions do. And I answer every question that comes in. But if you find me on my YouTube channel, you can reach out to me and then I can connect. I don't have a coaching program. I'm not selling a course. I don't have a book. I'm just trying to help people make work optional. And then being prior military, prior law enforcement, this always feels kind of soft when I say this, but my goal is to help people reach financial freedom, because I think the world is a better place when people have the ability to take the jobs they want instead of the jobs they have to do for money. So the more people we can get to financial freedom, the better everyone's going to be.
Well, I think we'll wrap up with that. You said it better than I could. So thank you so much for being on, Dion. I love your story. I love your kind of mindset around everything. I agree with a lot of your controversial opinions, and I appreciate you sharing it with us today. So we'll have to have you back on some other time to kind of go over things and hear how your YouTube channel growth is going, because I want to get into SEO and all that fun stuff that my partner Kap is all into. But we'll save that for another time. Thanks again, Dion. Really appreciate you bringing on.
Thank you.
For the Bill and Kap Show, I'm Bill. We'll see you next time.